This wasn't random. You are not who you think you are. And somewhere inside you already know that. By the end of this, nothing external will change. Your name will be the same. Your history will remain intact. But the structure behind the identity you repeat in your head will look different. Most people believe identity is something discovered, a stable core, a personality, a set of traits that define who they are. But identity is rarely discovered. It is constructed. Constructed through repetition, through adaptation, through subtle negotiations with the environment. When you were younger, certain reactions were rewarded. Others were discouraged. Some emotions were welcomed. Others were inconvenient. Without realizing it, you adjusted. You learned which version of yourself reduced conflict, which version earned approval, which version felt safest in unstable situations. That version became familiar. Familiarity feels like authenticity. But familiarity and truth are not the same. The brain prefers coherence. It wants a consistent narrative. So it stitches together repeated behaviors and calls it me. I am calm. I am strong. I am independent. I am difficult. I am rational. I am the one who doesn't need anyone. These statements feel solid, but most of them began as strategies. Strategies are not lies, they are solutions. Solutions to environments that required adjustment. If expressing anger created rejection, you became controlled. If vulnerability created exposure, you became self-contained. If unpredictability surrounded you, you became hyper-aware. Each adaptation was intelligent. Each one served a function. Over time, the strategy hardened into identity. You stopped saying, "I learned to be this way." You began saying, "This is who I am." There is a difference. The difference is subtle. A learned posture can feel natural after enough repetition. You forget what existed before it. Sometimes there was nothing before it, just raw potential, unshaped reactions, unfiltered impulses. Identity solidified around what worked, not necessarily around what was true. There is a quiet tension that appears when the constructed identity no longer aligns with the internal state. You feel slightly fragmented, slightly misaligned, as if parts of you are performing while something deeper remains silent. This is not dramatic. It does not feel like crisis. It feels like mild dissonance. You act one way externally. Internally, something resists. Most people suppress that resistance. They double down on the identity. They reinforce the role. Roles are efficient. They reduce uncertainty. If you know your character in the social structure, interactions become predictable. the reliable one, the distant one, the caretaker, the skeptic, the strong one, the quiet one. Each role stabilizes relationships. But stability is not the same as authenticity. Sometimes the role continues long after the original need disappears. You may still act guarded in situations that are no longer threatening. You may still avoid closeness even when safety is present. The identity persists because it is practiced. Practice makes patterns automatic. Automatic patterns feel real. But real does not mean essential. There is often a small gap between who you perform as and what you actually feel. That gap widens slowly. It widens when the environment changes, but the identity does not. You might tell yourself you are independent, but independence may have begun as protection. You might believe you are emotionally detached, but detachment may have formed to avoid overwhelm. You might insist you are always logical, but logic may have shielded you from chaos. None of these traits are inherently false. They are incomplete. Identity is often a compressed summary of coping mechanisms. Compressed enough to feel stable. Stable enough to defend. When someone questions that identity, irritation appears. Not because they are wrong, but because the structure feels threatened. Threat to identity feels like threat to survival. The brain does not distinguish clearly between social destabilization and physical risk. If a role maintained belonging, questioning it feels dangerous. Belonging is regulatory. The nervous system stabilizes around predictable social feedback. Pause. So the identity that secured that feedback becomes sacred. Even if it no longer reflects the full internal landscape. There are moments when the mask slips. Usually in private. When you are alone and less structured. You may notice impulses that contradict your self-description. Sensitivity beneath strength. Dependence beneath independence. Anger beneath calm. These contradictions feel uncomfortable. The mind rushes to suppress them. It says, "That's not me." But the presence of a reaction means it belongs somewhere in the system. Denial does not erase it. It relocates it. Unacknowledged traits do not disappear. They surface indirectly. Through tension, through sudden overreactions, through unexplained fatigue. When the constructed identity becomes rigid, flexibility decreases. Rigidity creates internal pressure. Pressure seeks release. Release often looks irrational from the outside, but it is usually a suppressed part pushing upward. You may think you are consistent, But consistency can be maintained through effort that goes unnoticed. Notice how much energy it takes to remain who you think you are. Effort indicates maintenance. Maintenance implies construction. Something constructed requires upkeep. If identity were entirely organic, it would not feel fragile under scrutiny. Fragility reveals structure. Structure reveals assembly. Assembly reveals adaptation. This does not mean your identity is false. It means it is partial. Partial identities are efficient. They simplify complexity. But simplification reduces depth. You are more contradictory than your self-description allows. Contradiction is not inconsistency. It is complexity. Complexity feels destabilizing. So the mind prefers a cleaner narrative. I am this, and not that. But both often coexist. The identity you repeat is the visible layer. Underneath it is a wider field. Wider and less organized. That field contains impulses that never became roles. Traits that were not rewarded. Versions of you that did not fit the environment. They were not eliminated. They were archived. When certain situations activate them, you feel unfamiliar to yourself. You might say, "That's not like me." But it is. It simply has not been integrated. Integration requires awareness of contradiction. Awareness feels destabilizing at first, because it dissolves certainty. Certainty about who you are. Certainty provides comfort. But comfort can conceal limitation. When you say, "This is just how I am," there is finality in it. Finality closes exploration. Exploration exposes construction. Construction exposes adaptation. Adaptation exposes vulnerability. Vulnerability destabilizes identity. And so the cycle continues. You defend who you believe yourself to be. Not necessarily because it is accurate, but because it is familiar. Familiarity reduces anxiety, even if it restricts growth. Notice the moments when your behavior surprises you. Those moments are not anomalies. They are cracks. Cracks in the polished narrative. Through those cracks, other layers are visible. Layers that contradict the role. Layers that complicate the identity. Complexity is not chaos. It is depth. Depth feels uncertain because it lacks clean edges. Edges make things definable. Definitions feel safe. Safety can be built on simplification. But simplification is not totality. You are not only the version that functions well. You are also the version that reacts, that doubts, that wants, that contradicts. When those parts are ignored, tension increases. The tension may not have a name. It may simply feel like restlessness or subtle dissatisfaction. That dissatisfaction is often misattributed to external circumstances. But sometimes it originates from internal compression. Compression of parts that never became part of the official identity. When you consider the possibility that your identity is adaptive rather than absolute, something shifts. Not externally. Internally. There is space. Space between reaction and self-description. In that space, flexibility appears. Flexibility does not erase who you have been. It widens it. The moment you notice that the identity was assembled, not discovered, rigidity softens.
I'm Oliver, and now you know why this happens. Or at least a part of it.